All right, so today we're going to be looking at this House Ethics Committee report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz. You've probably seen the headlines flying around. We're going to break down what's in this report and what it might mean, not only for Gaetz, but also for the Republican Party. Before we get started, if you want to keep up with all the latest on this developing story, be sure to subscribe.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a crazy few days since this report dropped.
It really has. So this report, it's basically the result of this months-long investigation. And, well, the findings are pretty rough. What were some of the things that jumped out at you?
Well, the report claims there was a lot of serious misconduct, and it possibly violated House rules and standards of conduct. We're talking about accusations of prostitution, illicit drug use, accepting gifts that he shouldn't have, and even obstructing investigations.
And this isn't like based on rumors or anything. This is a bipartisan committee that actually looked at evidence and interviewed witnesses.
Exactly. The fact that this committee, made up of Democrats and Republicans, voted unanimously to release this report, I think that really says a lot about how serious these allegations are.
And it's important to remember that some of these accusations are extra concerning because they involve a minor.
Absolutely. The allegations of statutory rape are incredibly serious if they're true, and could have some major legal consequences for Gaetz.
Now, Gaetz has denied all of these allegations, especially the ones about sexual contact with a minor. He's saying that he often sent money to women he was dating, and that his behavior was because he was working and playing hard. What do you make of his defense?
Well, it's a bold strategy for sure. He's basically trying to say it was just youthful indiscretion, and that it's all a big misunderstanding. We'll have to see if that resonates with the public or not.
He's also been pretty active on social media, sharing screenshots and claiming there's some kind of revenge plan against him.
Right. It seems like he's trying to go on the offensive and control the narrative, but honestly just comes across as kind of desperate.
It's interesting to me because before all this came out, there was talk of Gaetz possibly becoming Trump's attorney general. It makes you wonder what kind of behavior might have been seen as acceptable in certain political circles.
That's a really interesting point. It speaks to a larger issue of power dynamics and accountability in politics.
So where does all of this leave Matt Gaetz? Is his political career over? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And if you're liking this discussion so far, don't forget to give us a like.
That's the question everyone's asking. Before this report, there was even talk of him running for Marco Rubio's Senate seat. But now, it's hard to imagine him coming back from this.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty steep uphill battle, to say the least.
Exactly. The court of public opinion is tough. And the fact that this report is so detailed and damning, I think it'll be really hard for him to regain the trust of voters.
So if his political aspirations are probably over, what's next for him?
Well, he already has that gig on OANN, so he could easily become a media personality. We've seen other politicians do that after they've been disgraced. They use their notoriety to build a platform.
It's almost a predictable pattern now, isn't it?
Unfortunately, it is. And for some, it's a way to stay relevant and hold on to some power, even after they've lost their elected office.
But even if he moves into media, these allegations are going to stick with him.
Absolutely. This isn't something that'll just disappear.
And then there's the question of how this affects the Republican Party. What do you think they should do about this?
I think mainstream Republicans need to come out and strongly condemn Gaetz's behavior. They need to distance themselves from him and make it clear that they absolutely do not condone this kind of conduct.
But that could be tricky. He still has some pretty strong support within the party.
It's definitely a balancing act. They have to think about the potential political fallout, but also the need to uphold ethical standards.
It seems like a lose-lose situation for them.
In a way, it is, but they can't afford to stay silent.
Well, we've covered a lot already, but there's still so much more to unpack. Let's dive into the potential fallout from this report for both Gaetz and the Republican Party after a short break.
Sounds good. You know, the Republican Party is really facing a test here. How they respond to this whole scandal could really affect their future, especially with the next election cycle coming up.
It's a huge distraction when they need to be showing a united front. It's not exactly the image they want to be putting out there, especially when they're trying to appeal to family values and morality.
Right, exactly. It just plays right into their opponent's hands. They're going to use this to make the whole party look corrupt and out of touch.
Oh yeah, for sure. Those attack ads are probably already being written as we speak. So how can they even fix this? Is it even possible at this point?
Damage control is never easy in a situation like this.
Yeah.
I think the first step is just acknowledging the problem and taking a strong stance. No more tiptoeing around it or downplaying how serious these allegations are.
Right. They need to make it crystal clear that this kind of behavior is unacceptable and that it won't be tolerated. But like we said, it's a tough balance. They can't afford to alienate Gates' supporters either. They're a big part of their base.
That's true. But they can't ignore the moderate Republicans and independent voters. Those voters are probably going to be turned off by this whole thing. They need to find a way to walk that line.
So what's the answer? How do they do that?
They need a carefully worded message, something that condemns what Gates did, but also reaffirms the party's commitment to ethical conduct. Distance themselves from Gates without changing their core values.
So basically, they need to prove to voters that they're serious about accountability and that they're the party that does the right thing. But there's still the trust issue. How can voters trust a party that might have ignored this kind of behavior?
It'll take time and effort to rebuild that trust. And it'll take more than just words. They need actions. Holding members accountable, putting stricter ethical guidelines in place, maybe even supporting an independent oversight body. Those are the things that will show voters they're committed to change.
So walk the walk, not just talk the talk. But let's be real. Is the Republican Party even capable of that kind of self-reflection and change? They've definitely dealt with scandals before,
Yeah.
and they haven't always handled them well.
That's a fair question. And I think some skepticism is warranted. But I also think it's important to give them a chance to show they're serious about doing better. If they take the right steps, they could come out of this stronger. But if they don't, they just try to protect Gates or sweep this whole thing under the rug, the consequences could be really bad.
It's a turning point for the Republican Party for sure. The choices they make in the next few weeks and months are going to have a big impact on their future. What are your thoughts on all this? What do you think the potential consequences could be for the party? Let us know in the comments. And if you're finding this analysis interesting, give us a like. It helps other people find the show.
This whole situation just shows that actions have consequences. You can't just try to hide things and expect them to disappear.
Accountability is important. And voters deserve to know that people in office are held to a high standard.
Absolutely. And the Republican Party needs to prove that they understand that.
So we've talked about the broader implications for the Republican Party and what this might mean for Matt Gaetz' future. But let's focus back on Gaetz himself. What do you think this means for his future, both politically and personally? Okay, so we've talked about what this means for the Republican Party and for Gaetz. But this is all happening, with this big political landscape in the background. Do you think this scandal could affect the upcoming election, Brittany?
Oh, it's definitely going to be a factor, especially in those races that are really close. The Democrats are going to use this to make the Republicans look bad. They're more worried about protecting their own than about holding them accountable.
Yeah, it seems like it could really fire up the Democratic base.
Yeah.
And maybe even sway some independent voters who are undecided.
Exactly. It feeds into that whole idea that Republicans care more about power than doing the right thing. And that could be really damaging in an election where there's probably going to be a big turnout.
This also brings up some questions about how the Republican Party even picks its candidates. What was their vetting process? How did someone with these serious allegations even get to be so prominent in the party?
Those are good questions. And I think the party is going to have to do some serious soul searching about how to stop this kind of thing from happening again. They need to look at how they vet candidates, sure. But they also need to look at the culture that lets this behavior slide.
It's not just about one person, it's bigger than that.
Exactly. It's about power, accountability, and being willing to ignore bad behavior.
What kind of message do you think the Republican Party should send out about this? To their own members and to everyone else?
I think they need to show that they're really serious about changing. Just condemning Gaetz isn't enough. They have to show they're actually doing something about the problems that led to this. That means stricter ethical rules. Holding members accountable for what they do, creating a culture of transparency and accountability.
It's a lot to ask, but it seems like it's really important for the party to be healthy and credible in the long run.
It is, and it's not just about politics either. It's about having faith in our institutions and making sure that people in power are held to the highest ethical standards.
Those are important points. We've talked about a lot today. The details of the report, what it could mean for Gaetz and the Republicans. But before we go, Brittany, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think this whole situation just shows how important it is to hold our leaders accountable, no matter what party they belong to. We need to demand transparency and integrity from the people who represent us and be willing to hold them accountable when they mess up.
Well said, Brittany. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today. This has been a complicated conversation and honestly kind of disheartening at times, but I think it's an important one to have.
I agree. And I hope it encourages people to really think about the kind of leadership we want and what we expect from the people who represent us.
To everyone listening out there, we want to hear what you think. How should political parties deal with these kinds of accusations against their members? Leave us a comment and let us know. And if you found this discussion interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more conversations like this. Thanks for joining us.